So
Micro expressions are facial expressions
Yeah.
that last about 40 to 200 milliseconds, and the untrained eye cannot catch them. It's almost like 1 to 5 frames in a video. So it's like a pop-up, it's like a flash.
wow.
But we do communicate what is happening on the inside.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a good professional. I want to be the right professional.
Okay.
And not everything that's good is right.
George Karkanis, a Greek forensic psychologist, psychotherapist, and behavioral analyst. And he unpacks what forensic psychology is. He explains how identity and faith shape true restoration, and why resilience, fresh creative thinking, and a secure sense of self are essential when working on the front lines of human brokenness. Thank you so much for being willing to meet and talk to me. George Karkanis, you're from Greece.
That's right.
You live in the beautiful city of Athens, the historic city, big city. And I have your card in front of me. It tells me that you are listed as having 3 skill sets. Firstly, as a forensic psychologist, then as a psychotherapist, and then as a behavioral analyst. And I think...
Sounds weird, huh?
I don't even
Unknown
understand...
terms to some people, perhaps.
Exactly. So me, I don't know what a forensic psychologist is. What is a forensic psychologist, George?
Yeah, I will explain that in simple words for everybody that is listening will be able to understand. Forensic psychology is pretty much the field of psychology focusing on criminal and delinquent behaviors.
Okay.
Out of all behaviors, that's what we specialize and focus on the most. And also the application of psychology as field of knowledge within the legal system.
Okay.
So a forensic psychologist has to do with criminals, with victimization, with legal proceedings like interviewing, trials, lie detection, a whole bunch of other things. Writing forensic psychological reports whenever that is needed, and pretty much to help in investigations for a crime.
Okay. So from the way you've described it, it's quite a broad field,
Exactly.
dealing with victims on one end of the spectrum and alleged criminals on the other, and convicted criminals as well. So it's a broad field. What drew you into that field, George? What attracted you into that?
Actually, I have an interesting story. I was never, from the very beginning, a psychologist. I took a big leap of a change in life, and I used to be in the IT world.
Okay.
Computer science, and due to my work in counter-trafficking ministries, I realized that, hold on, I don't enjoy that much anyway working with devices, but I really feel connected when I work with people. I'm like, what do we do here as a counter-trafficking ministry? I should be a psychologist. Makes perfect sense. And that led to the next thought that was, hold on a second though, if, let's say, a woman that has been a victim of human trafficking steps out of it, would she ever feel comfortable to enter a therapeutic framework and a session with a male psychologist? And I answered due to experience from this line of work, and I said, absolutely not. But then it clicked in my mind. I was like, yeah, but forensic psychology, with everything else I had in my background and under my belt at that time, made perfect sense. And I went back to school, started from a new Bachelor of Science in Forensic Psychology and then a Master's degree in Forensic Psychology. And that led to becoming who and what I am today. So I unite two worlds, people and technology, and I consider myself an interesting hybrid that can speak into a broad area of knowledge skills.
So you got into forensic psychology and psychotherapy and behavioral analysis because of your involvement in counter-trafficking.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're a people person, so you began to realize, I would like to work more directly with people. Let's come back to that point you made. I'd like to unpack a little more in a minute about your professional training. Let's come back for a minute to that point you made about women who have been trafficked and forced into prostitution not being comfortable seeing a male psychotherapist. So you have become a psychotherapist, but a lot of the people you are seeking to serve are women. How are you helping them? What's the connection there? Help us to understand.
Me as a psychologist now and psychotherapist, a forensic psychologist actually, I can provide unique insights to how we approach our operations in counter-trafficking.
Right.
Perspectives that, if I humbly say, not all organizations and ministries have. As far concerning therapeutic sessions, deliberately, I do not have therapeutic sessions with any woman that we have approached as an organization in an outreach, for example. I don't want to be their therapist, and it's not going to be the most beneficial thing. I am known to them as a safe, godly man. And that is, to me, far more important than be their psychotherapist. They can find plenty of psychotherapists.
So they find psychotherapists, psychotherapy elsewhere.
But a crucial part of women like that, in order their therapeutic journey, is to redefine the term man in the dictionary of their own self. Let's think about it for a moment. What does a man mean to a woman that has experienced sexual exploitation? Trafficker, abuser, rapist, evil, malicious intent always is there. So my biggest accomplishment, if I may call it that way, the biggest reward I get when I ask me, so George, what is your biggest reward in this world? I say, you want to know what is my biggest reward? Is to step in the office, the minister's office in the morning and have women that are out of that lifestyle to jump from their chair and run the room. Not walk, run the room to greet me and give me a hug.
Okay.
Why is that important? Because that means that in the heart, the mind, and the dictionary of their life, the term man has been redefined from all these evil things into something like somebody I can trust.
Human being I can trust.
Credible person. Safety, security. He understands me. He wants my good and not my bad. So that is a much more crucial role that not everyone can play, because not everyone engages with these women. Like I say, psychotherapists, we can find plenty, but who's going to play this role?
Now, interestingly, the benefit of that to the woman, even the way you are talking about that, shows me that you understand all the psychological struggles that a person who has been trafficked is going through. So you have a professional understanding, which then translates into human relationships. Tell us a bit about the benefit of your professional training as a psychologist and psychotherapist.
Psychology has two hands. One is science and the other is art. So we develop scientific knowledge through means of observation, but the application of this knowledge is never the same to two people. So if we take two random people from the population and let's say run the exact same identical psychological intervention, we will not get the identical. That's where the art part, the application of psychology, is a skill. As a professional in that field, I know people. I can understand people. I know what's going on inside their head. And something magical, if I call it that way, happens when you meet an individual where they are, not just from location point of view, but meet them where they are internally. And when you start speaking what is going on in somebody else's mind, automatically you see the surprise element on their face. There is some openness. How can you know how I truly feel right now when I am trying so hard to play the persona I have developed in order to be able to survive on the streets of Athens, for example? to survive inside a brothel where men pretty much rape me for profit. And that is the most important thing. And it reminds me a little bit of what Jesus was doing when he was encountering people. He was not addressing the persona that those people sometimes wanted to project. He was meeting them on a deeper personal level. And partially, humanly speaking, that is something that a psychologist can do in this line of work. So it does matter if we carry that expertise or if we don't. It can be a game changer sometimes.
Interestingly, as you were talking about meeting people where they are, I was thinking of Jesus meeting us where we are, thankfully, rather than expecting us to be somebody else before he receives us wonderfully. That's the wonderful thing about the good news of Jesus, isn't it? That he meets us where we are. But your professional training then gives you insight as you hold conversations with people, gives you a professional insight, which then translates into a human response, the art side, as they talk. So you're listening. How does the connection happen between the science and the art in your mind while you're holding a conversation?
Well, that's a long conversation that I talk to college students many times about. And it touches a little bit what I call the difference between skill and knowledge. Somebody can be very knowledgeable, but be totally without skills. I've met university professors that have been some of the most unskillful psychologists I've ever met. They could not implement, they could not do. And as I come from a special forces background, we say those that cannot do, they teach.
Okay.
There is a motto in that part of the world that sees things that way. In order to become more specific in answering your question, the knowledge of psychology helps me to understand where that person I have in front of me stands in an interaction. And as soon as I start analyzing that, then I can build communication in a way that will be perceived positively.
This episode is sponsored by CrossMap. If you're looking for a place that fills your soul and strengthens your faith, then visit crossmap.com, your trusted source for inspiration and life-changing stories from people of faith. Do you have your own story to tell? CrossMap Blogs is a welcoming place to launch your own blog, publish your testimony in Christ, and share stories that glorify God and edify his people. And while you're there, sign up for the CrossMap daily newsletter and get top Christian videos, inspiring devotionals, and stories from other content creators to strengthen your faith, delivered straight to your inbox. Be encouraged, be a part, be blessed. Visit crossmap.com.
We are designed by our Creator, whatever happens on the inside, to communicate on the outside. And the interesting thing about it is that we cannot stop that mechanism. We cannot. So if we're...
That's slightly frightening. I'm sitting here opposite you, George. I'm slightly worried about what you're thinking about me. Yeah.
And that addresses a little bit, not a little bit, but actually that's what a behavior analyst does pretty much. Behavior analysis is the analysis of behavioral patterns, nonverbal communication, linguistics, paralinguistics, and stuff like that. Whatever we experience on the inside, so if I have, for example, an emotion of disgust or a topic that I'm talking about, I will produce something that is called microfacial expressions.
Okay.
I will demonstrate that emotion of disgust because the topic of what I'm talking about disgusts me.
So
micro expressions are facial expressions that last about 40 to 200 milliseconds, and the untrained eye cannot catch them. It's almost like 1 to 5 frames in a video. So it's like a pop-up. It's like a flash.
Wow.
But we do communicate what is happening on the inside. Then if we talk about language, a lot of thinking patterns, how we think. Am I a person that cares more about the general picture, or am I more about specifics? how we'll construct speech will give on that information, will give out that information. So knowing how the human brain works, how the psyche works, and we are able to understand what all the types of forensic populations, that's how it's called, forensic populations that I am interacting with. So I don't need to ask them. I will look at them and I will know how they feel today.
So that's why forensic populations are categories. You categorize people in some way.
Forensic population in my field, we call any group of people that are inside or surrounding a criminal context. Okay. So for example, offenders is forensic population, victims is forensic population, law enforcement officers is forensic population, prison guards are forensic population, people working in counter-trafficking organizations, they are forensic population, whether they see themselves as such or not. But scientifically speaking, they fall into the broad term of forensic population. If you do the research is in forensic population of this and this group.
So just back to ask a little more about the knowledge and the skill piece, that jump from the science to the art. You can clearly, the knowledge you can acquire. If you work hard at it, you can study and acquire the knowledge. Can you learn the skill, the translating the knowledge into the...
Absolutely. And that is the difficult part. An endeavor is a journey because a skill is constantly developed, has to be honed to become more shiny, more effective, more smoother. And a lot of fellow professionals, perhaps they're afraid to take the step to develop a skill because it's a different thing than learning knowledge. Learning knowledge is a much faster procedure, but develop a skill usually takes years.
It's a lifetime of learning. Yeah.
Exactly. And there is one more important point here that perhaps we need to address, that if we talk about a skill-based intervention, I carry 100% of the responsibility for the delivered result. You understand what I mean?
Not entirely.
If, how can I put this in simple words? Let's talk about a therapeutic session, for example. And you have some therapeutic models that have you clear techniques with clear steps and tell you step 1 you do this, step 2 you do this, 6, 7, 8, how many steps. You fulfill the steps, blindfolded, just follow the protocol and you will be scientifically sound as a professional and you will have done a great session. Is it so? The answer is no. Because the difference between a skilled, let's say professional, is that the protocol is just a point of reference, that I always check it with the data that I receive from the person I have in front of me on the spot, and I adapt and I adjust
to the response.
Not being blindfolded and just say, what does the protocol says? It says this. Oh my gosh, I need to follow the protocol, because if I don't, I'm not a good professional. I don't want to be a good professional. I want to be the right professional.
Okay.
And not everything that's good is right.
What I'm hearing is that the listening is an art, and it's not only listening, it's watching, it's observing, it's reacting to those, what did you call them? Micro
expressions.
Expressions, there you go. So there's a lot of hard work involved in engaging with a person. On the basis of your knowledge, you're applying it in the conversation, in the engagement with the individual. And that's the skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You said something in the course of that I didn't know, that this is, I'd just like to go back to for a minute. You talked about being from a special forces background. I didn't know about that. Tell us a bit about that. So you have a military background or something?
Yeah, in my country, military service is obligatory. And so I just chose to serve. I volunteered to serve in the special forces, and I joined the paratroopers division, and that's where I served.
You jumped out of aircraft?
Aircraft, helicopters.
Okay. Why did you volunteer for that?
I found it interesting, more interesting than serving anywhere else.
A bit of adventure?
adventure, you do something that perhaps rarely you will have again the opportunity to do. It's not something you find in your backyard to jump with a military parachute with all your equipment.
Whereas you could be a
military,
cook.
for example, yeah.
Okay.
So it was a unique experience. You learn more things, you develop new skills. Unorthodox warfare by default is based on developing unique skills in order to overcome adversities, in order to accomplish your mission. So I'm very thankful that I made that. It definitely has benefited me later in life.
In what concrete ways has it benefited you?
The mindset of resilience and at the same time the flexibility.
Resilience and flexibility.
Resilience and flexibility and thinking the cliche outside of the box. But the problem I have with that cliche is, okay, I think outside of the box. Where is that outside? What exists outside of the box? How far outside of the box do I need to go?
Okay.
And where? Do I need to go above? So I have a small problem with that cliche outside of the box. And I rather call what message is trying to, this cliche to convey, that I call it innovative thinking or original thought. Many people confuse remembering with thinking. And they say, okay, I have a problem in front of me and say, oh, I'm thinking all day of the problem I have. And the truth of the matter is they are not thinking, they're just remembering something they thought before. So actually what they're doing is memory recall, not original thought, not production of original thought, in order how to solve the problem they have in front of them. And that's one of the reasons that why many people feel overwhelmed. They just repeatedly remember something they thought before about a similar problem or the same problem, instead of sitting down and creating original thinking, original thought about what they have in front of them that they need to solve.
So you use that original thinking in your forensic psychology?
By default, otherwise this line of work is very demanding. The forensic population, when we talk about offenders and victims, is, in my opinion and experience, is the most demanding group of people to interact with.
Let's talk about some of those forensic populations with whom you work. You work with victims, clearly. We've mentioned that. And that's a major part of what your ministry in Greece is committed to doing. But you've mentioned working also with offenders. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I can't imagine sitting down with a trafficker who's perhaps been imprisoned, been convicted of trafficking. I can't imagine where you begin the conversation. Talk us through that a little bit, George.
Yeah, those interactions are really interesting. You sit down with an offender. The first thing I can share with you, Gordon, is that, like I told you earlier, I rarely ask people, so how are you today? I rather start by saying, wow, I see you wear a blue shirt. Blue is also my favorite color. Is it yours as well? That's why you have it on, or it was randomly chosen? And that's a much better, warmer, more affectionate initiation of communication. Let's just say, hey, Gordon, how are you today?
I'm unlikely to tell you very much in response to the how are you today question, but in response to the conversation about the shirt, it might open up a conversation.
And then, boom, we have a bridge. We start building a bridge of communication that can take us somewhere. And with offenders or ex-offenders, especially in a therapeutic session, what I do here is just to take them somewhere, a little forward. Is it gonna be 1 centimeter forward? It is still forward. Somebody that has built through years and years of engagement in crime, it has become their identity. Identities is a very hard thing to break and change. And interestingly enough, one of the main things Christ does to a human being that receives him is to change their identity, give them a new name, make them a new creation, and call them his children, something that we are not called before we receive him.
Have you seen that happening with ex-offenders?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that, or can you not really talk about that?
I can give some information. There comes a point where the conversation and the therapeutic interventions will lead us to address the concept that there is something more than the physical tissue in our existence. And the time comes where I say usually that if we were just brain tissue, you wouldn't need me, a psychologist. A biologist would resolve things. But why can't they? Because the true human existence is in the immaterial world and is the soul. So where does that part come from? It can't be but to have a creator, and that's the God of the Bible. And when we talk about people that have seen the darkest of the dark and have done horrific things, they're getting it, they acknowledge it. Their minds, their brains operate in a different way. They're very rational, they're very mathematic, if we talk about offenders, okay? So with realistic and pragmatic approach, if you look around, the world cannot just have made itself. It must have a creator.
Right.
And that leads to more on the spiritual side. I want to know more. Then at the same time, I have the legal right, it's legally okay, to share with them about the God of the Bible that loves them. Christ died for them. And some other times, they have met Jesus in the prison. When they exited the prison, they were Christians already, but still carrying
all the baggage of what they've done.
Chronic PTSD, antisocial behavior disorders, flashback memories, lots of things that they need to do clinical work in order to deal with and restructure their entire self pretty much that has been damaged by many times a lifetime of criminal behavior. So when you stand at the edge of the cliff to hear that there is something that transcends the human existence, that transcends the physical, you get it a whole lot easier than being a law-abiding citizen, sitting in your comfortable sofa in your beautiful house, and living a peaceful and lawful life. Exactly because these people have been on the dark side. Some of them even have been involved in witchcraft. So their worldview is many times a whole lot different. People that have never entered organized crime and other criminal behaviors.
So they're sometimes more open to solutions because the crime has damaged them as well. Their criminal behavior has damaged them.
Absolutely. And they acknowledge, they come to the point where they have no other option than to acknowledge the damage they have received. Okay. And then they face the dilemma. Am I gonna do something about it or am I not? And usually because they are men of action. Okay. Talk about criminals. The crime is action is active by default. There's no passive crime. You actively engage in a crime. So the vast majority of this population is very active people. And I would say that in most cases, they choose to do something about the damage they see in front of them when they look themselves in the mirror. And that's how they end up with me, I would say.
Coming out of that, do you have any experience professionally of restorative justice, of those ex-offenders facing their victims, or is that not an area in which you have been involved?
Actually, on the way here, while at the airport, I was in communication with one of the guys that is in his therapeutic journey. He was contacting one of the people that had emotionally, physically abused him in his childhood, which then led him, it was one of the main reasons that served as facilitating factors of engaging in crime for many years. And now being out of that life, being a Christian, accepted Christ, coming closer and closer to Jesus every day, he wanted to contact those people and let them know, hey, you did this and this to me, but God asks me to forgive you, even though you did things that, like, if anybody read, he sent me the messages, the very long messages he sent them. And even as a professional, okay, I didn't cry because I'm used to these kind of stories. But I would say it's a story that will make you cry.
And in this case, the victim initiated that
Yes.
with the perpetrators.
Yes.
It's extraordinary.
And the funny thing, actually, it's funny because if you don't see it as funny, it will infuriate you. The reply was very negative, like pretty much in denial that, yeah, okay, that's your perceptions.
Okay.
The keyword perception was used, where even there was the desire to restore the relationship, rebuild the relationship.
It just wasn't accepted by the
It
perpetrators.
wasn't accepted. And when he did that for the people that abused him, imagine, and it's obvious that he has the same feelings for the people that he hurt as a criminal. And he went and said, I'm sorry. At least in the cases that could be done. So yes, I believe that from a Christian perspective, restorative justice is a must, because that's what God asks us, is to forgive and restore relationships by inviting Christ in the situation and in the relationship.
Let's talk about another part of another forensic population, the police force, law enforcement. You work with law enforcement, I know. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the benefits you've seen from working with law enforcement, what you do with law enforcement?
I had the privilege to train in the past, and will continue this year, Lord willing, to train some police officers of some units and prosecutors in a country in Eastern Europe that work with cases of child sexual exploitation and abuse. In other words, cases of pedophilia. What was devastating to me is that I saw people covered, let's say, in gunpowder and blood and wounds, like coming from a battlefield of medieval times, let's say, or 1800s. And they are.
Which you mean they've been damaged by being exposed.
When I saw them in
The law
rooms, law enforcement, especially the law enforcement officers, I could see the scars, let's say, metaphorically speaking, of the battle that they are giving. And my heart was aching for them. I'm like, I will help you. That's what I said inside of me, I will help you. And there are great benefits that come about this, because many countries, especially in Eastern Europe, police officers are understaffed, they're underfunded, the parliaments do not legislate complete, holistic, and crystal clear penal laws. Many times it's confusing to them. Do we make the arrest? Do we not make the arrest? And you may find yourself to do months of work, and eventually you cannot even arrest the perpetrator. Not because they haven't done anything harmful, but because the laws are not very thorough, are not very clear. So they feel neglected, they feel many times abandoned, that there is anyone that truly cares for them, cares as human beings.
That's what you found yourself doing, caring for them in the context of this professional training.
And at the same time, many times they do not receive funding for proper training. So I was there training them on vicarious trauma, personal mental health care, and behavioral analysis. And that was funded. I did it for free, but travel expense, accommodation, and so on was covered by an NGO that brought me in the country.
Okay.
Because the government was not willing to provide resources for this kind of stuff. And many times we rush, I would say, citizens to say, oh, the police is not doing their job correctly. I would invite all of us to pause for just a few seconds and consider, are we able to know what a police officer is going through in a legitimate effort with a sense of responsibility to deliver their duties? Because many times I'm having picture from within the system that they're being asked to complete the impossible task. And there is something that is called in psychology hopelessness and helplessness. And when you think that nothing will work out, there's no solution, things will never change, and you lose hope and you don't see anybody to really lean over your situation, to really extend a hand and say, here, grab my hand. I'm here to help you. We're gonna walk this together. You're not alone. These words are crucial phrases of encouragement that all human beings we need to be hearing regularly. Many times police officers enter that state of hopelessness and helplessness because they're being asked to do the impossible task.
You mentioned vicarious trauma experienced by police officers as they're exposed to the most terrible things. And I presume that's what leads to this, that contributes towards this hopelessness and helplessness. How do you encourage people to cope with vicarious trauma or secondary trauma? Is it largely with those things you've just said about community, you're not alone, we're with you, we understand? Are those some of the elements that help people to process vicarious trauma? What would be your advice as a psychologist?
Without making it too complicated, like I will avoid, let's say, to give a clear recipe with steps.
Because every individual is different in every situation.
Exactly. But I will talk about principles. In order to cope and reverse vicarious trauma and find healing, I call it the 4 pillars of human existence. And that is identity, intimacy, cognition, and emotion. Vicarious trauma and secondary trauma, they affect how we emote, what emotions we have, when we feel the emotions, what emotions we feel, can we label the emotion, can we manage properly the emotion, and so on. Cognition, how we think. Like I said earlier, am I capable of producing original thought? I'm just remembering something I thought before, and I have the pseudo sense that now I'm thinking. Well, all I'm doing is playing a movie in the screen of my mind that has played 1,000 times before. What are my thinking patterns? How they interact with my emotion? Identity. Who am I? Many people ask me, who are you? If I tell you I am a forensic psychologist, that's not who I am. That's what I am. Trauma and vicarious trauma is magnified if I operate from the ground of what I am, and can't start the healing process if we go back to the who I am. So George is a forensic psychologist that does all these wonderful things we have been discussing. But if I do it from that ground, it will burn me up in an instant. It's extremely difficult. But if I do it from the ground of who I am, child of God, I'm a playful guy, I'm just as driven person. These things do not go away even if I stop being a forensic psychologist. So the roots of my tree that water and provide nutrients to keep the tree healthy, my roots is who I am, my true identity. I draw strength from there. Then we have the intimacy, which is how we connect with each other. And I call it a pyramid that has many levels. And at the peak of the pyramid is sexual intercourse. So trauma affects all the levels of the pyramid of intimacy and distorts even sexual intimacy. So we can see in, let's say, law enforcement officers that work with pedophilia cases, their sexual life can be affected. How they connect with their children, they feel really weird to wash their baby girl, their 8 months baby girl, because they hold a naked baby in their hands when they have been working on a case where horrific things were happening to an 8-year-old. So we need to be feeding what I call healthy nutrients to these 4 pillars of identity: intimacy, connecting with others; cognition, how we think and what we think; and emotion, what we feel when we feel it, and how we manage the emotion. When we feed healthy food, why we say our body is healthy? Because we eat healthy food. Go and eat at fast food restaurants for a month, and then we'll see what your blood test results will show, right? What happened there? You didn't put the bad health inside of you, you've put bad food. You fed your system bad food. The same thing goes about the soul. When we feed the soul bad food, the soul suffers, the soul is wounded, the soul is traumatized. And we can reverse that by starting to feed the healthy food that our soul is yearning for.
George Karkanis, forensic psychologist, providing healthy nutrients to all sorts of forensic populations, child of God. Thank you very much for being willing to talk to me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. It's been educational and helpful.
You're very welcome, Goran. Thank you for giving me the privilege to have this dialogue with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Faith Without Frontiers. I hope you've been refreshed, stimulated, encouraged, and inspired by the conversation, perhaps even challenged. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please subscribe so that you don't miss the next story of faith in the series. And do consider sharing the podcast with friends, colleagues, or members of your church community. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and strengthen you as you serve Him wherever He has placed you.